Jeff has his Court of Calling, so he's going to be able to search up for specific silver bullets. It looks like he has Orzhov Pontiff.
Which is going to be real good.
Yeah, that can be good. He's also got a Kasali Pride Mage.
And 2 Pia and Kieran Nalar in the main deck, which is just such a good card against Affinity.
Yeah, really, really good. The one thing about Jeff's deck, though, is he's got a little bit of mana acceleration in the form of some Birds of Paradise and Wall of Roots, but generally speaking, Jeff's deck is quite a bit slower. Luckily, it looks like he's got his mana accelerant, so...
Yeah, so it looks like we've got a Razorverge Thicket into a Birds of Paradise from Jeff. Trey McGinn, however, does have Darksteel Citadel, 0 mana artifact into a Mox Opal, into a turn 1 Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah, so Trey and Jeff are both off to the races, essentially. They're getting probably the more explosive and fast draws that each of their decks are capable of.
Absolutely. So we got Jeff here is drawn for his turn. Looks like he's going to play a Wall of Roots. Hopefully he has another land, and then he can just play something else. Looks like he does have a Spellskite in his hand, which is going to be real good against that Arcbound Ravager.
Now, this is really one of the best case scenarios for Jeff because he doesn't have that many mana accelerants in his deck, and now he's got 2. And he's got both of them on the play against another fast deck where tempo really, really matters. So this has got to be best case scenario for Jeff.
Absolutely. One of the best ways that Trey can take this match is just to run away with the game very early. And it looked like he was poised to do so. However, Jeff is starting to catch up. It would have been interesting to see how this would have played out if Trey had been on the play, because then he would have been able to untap with all this while Jeff only had a Birds of Paradise, but that's not what happened. So Trey's gone ahead and drawn for his turn. He's landed that Blinkmoth Nexus, and let's see what he plays now.
Another thing that's going to be interesting about this is Jeff has the Spellskite, which is going to be really good against the Arcbound Ravager.
Absolutely. So it looks like we've got a Blinkmoth Nexus for Trey. He's cast an Etched Champion, which is going to have Metalcraft is turned on protection from all colors.
Wow.
However, Pia and Kieran makes 2 colorless flyers.
Oh, man. Jeff is just a savage, savage wizard.
Absolutely. Look how handsome those Thopter tokens are. They're just great.
P and Kieran really crafted those with some precision.
Plus, he has all these extra creatures in play that he can power up his cords.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff is really putting on a display of how good his deck potentially can be. I mean, I think if he was tutoring every single turn for the perfect card, this is basically how we would have drawn it up. And Trey has a really, really good draw. I mean, he's got his Arcbound Ravager. He had a Mox Opal to speed things up. He's got his Etched Champion that is normally really difficult for other cards to deal with. But Jeff has multiple blockers that are artifacts, so he's going to be able to block the Etched Champion. And Trey is never going to be able to move counters around because of that Spellskite. So both players are having great draws, probably in the top 10% of each deck's capability, but Jeff's just lines up a lot better against Trey than Trey's lines up against Jeff's.
Yeah, so it looks like Trey just went ahead and activated his Nexus, attacked, used his Welding Jar to save it when it was blocked by a Thopter. Just going to play a Signal Pest and pass.
And that is a rough trade to make. I mean, Jeff played 1 card, got a creature and 2 tokens, and Trey just traded one of his whole cards for one of those tokens.
Wow. So we've got looks like we have a Revelark on this side for Jeff, which is going to be very good at getting back creatures if Trey happens to handle some of them. But this Pia and Kieran is looking like it's going to put in some work with that Thopter. Trey just doesn't have a whole lot.
Yeah, Jeff is really amassing an army, and this really highlights one of the reasons why it can be scary to play an aggro deck is because when you play a really aggressive strategy like Affinity, you're really looking to steal game 1, and then you're probably going to lose one of your sideboard games in game 2 and then win your sideboard game on game 3 when you're on the play again. And so by Jeff having such a good draw this game, he's really disrupting that sort of expectation that the aggro players normally have, and it really bodes poorly for Trey over the course of this whole match.
So it looks like Trey just had a Darksteel Citadel for his turn, and he's attacking with just the Arcbound Ravager. Jeff has blocked with his Pia and Kieran Nalar, but I imagine Trey is going to be sacrificing some permanents to try and grow it. Now that Spellskite on Jeff's side is going to stop any modular shenanigans from Trey's Arcbound Ravager if Jeff decides to activate his ability, which I would be willing to bet that he's going to if that comes down to it. But let's take a look and see what Trey is going to do here.
So it looks like Jeff was willing to just trade his Pia for 2 artifacts, essentially. I think he's just planning on dealing with it some other way.
Yeah, he's absolutely willing to do that. He has that Revelark on the battlefield. If it ever happens to die, he can bring a Pia and Kieran back onto the battlefield, which is just going to be insane value because he'll get 2 more Thopter tokens.
Absolutely. And I mean, basically, Jeff just wants to make sure that not too much damage gets through, and he's just going to build a board. As soon as he draws a Chord of Calling, he's going to be able to combo at his convenience. There's not a whole lot that Trey can do.
Now, Trey did have a Steel Overseer for his turn, which is the one card in the Affinity deck that's going to allow him to actually compete when we get into board stalls like this. Eventually, at some point, he's going to be able to make it so that Edge Champion is big enough to attack through that Spellskite, and then Jeff is not going to have any blockers for it, and it can end the game at some point.
Yeah, what's interesting about this matchup is because neither player has much removal, they can really pick and choose how they're going to trade with each other, and if one of them draws a threat that's extremely hard to deal with, there's not much that the other player can do about it. So it's really going to be about whose side of the board is better than the others. And it'll be interesting to see if this Overseer can create enough of an advantage that is game winning before Jeff draws something like Chord of Calling that can let him combo out.
Absolutely. Now, we saw that Jeff didn't attack with his Revel Arc last turn, and so he's using that to block this Arcbound Ravager that he read Trey for, having just had the same attack again. Now, we do see the Steel Overseer was activated. However, we didn't get an Inkmoth Nexus activation, which is a little strange, since I imagine he might want to get some counters on those lands too. But
yeah,
that
he
Revel
could have
Arc,
activated both of his Nexus.
that Revel Arc is going to bring back.
And now Jeff actually has a way to kill the Overseer.
Absolutely.
That was sort of what he was angling for. Because he has very little removal, and Pia is one of his big ways to actually deal with things.
Yep, so now with the Overseer gone, he just has this 6/6 Ravager to handle. Eventually it will die, and the counters can just go on that Spellskite. Now, Jeff does have Path to Exile, which isn't going to trigger the modular, but again, he has plenty of blockers.
Yeah, and this is really good. I think Jeff sort of set the game up for this, because now there's a big Ravager, and he can, if the counters ever move off of it, then he can steal it from the Spellskite. And if the counters don't move, Jeff has plenty of chump blockers to kind of, spend as much time as he wants with it.
So it looks like Trey is just going to attack with that Ravager. Jeff's going to block with his Wall of Roots. Just about had been cashed in anyways. We've got another Steel Overseer. Now, Jeff does have 2 tokens that he can use with that Pia and Kieran, which he cashes 1 in, but he does just keep drawing lands. So he does need to find something like a Chord of Calling so he can chain into some Eternal Witnesses and continue to build his board presence. Trey could just draw a couple more good cards and just whittle Jeff's board down with this 7/7 Ravager.
Yeah, you can really see how just the pressure of attacking with this large Ravager is starting to force Jeff to cannibalize his board. It's been good that he's been able to deal with the Overseers because they could really run away from the game. And Trey on his side, he just has to run out those Overseers. He doesn't really get any kind of advantage by holding them back.
Yeah, he just has to keep playing artifacts with that Ravager on the battlefield. Any resource that Jeff uses to handle an artifact is just going to continue to make that Ravager grow.
Man, and for Jeff's great start, he is just drawing land after land after land.
He is flooding out.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing, though, is that as soon as he draws a Chord of Calling, though, he can be right back in it. Even if he starts to fall behind, he has some great ways to catch right back up.
Absolutely. He can very easily just chord for an Eternal Witness, get it back, which will then let him chord for a Kiki-Jiki so he can copy the Eternal Witness to get back the chord, and then at some point chord for a Resto Angel and win the game.
And now Trey is starting to sense a little bit of weakness, is starting to send in more creatures. He knows that Jeff is starting to run out of reasonable blocks, and if Jeff wants to preserve his life total, he's just going to have to block with more and more creatures that are essentially going to be gobbled up.
Absolutely. Now I'm a little surprised that he doesn't attack with that Edge Champion. Because of the Battle Cry, it would be a 4/4 and not just be able to get brickwalled by the Spellskite.
Yeah.
So I think that might be 4 damage that Trey might have missed.
Yeah, possibly. He may be holding it back as a blocker. I would be a little surprised about that, but that's, maybe he's valuing his life total.
So it looks like we're going to have Jeff's going to put some blocks and then throw a Thopter at the Signal Pest. So we're going to have all 3, the Vault Scourge and the Arcbound Ravager are going to be blocked. We're going to use the removal spell with P and Kieran Nalar tossing that token at the Signal Pest, which should kill it. I imagine he's going to sacrifice it to one of the Ravagers. My guess would be the 1/1 to make it a 2/2. Might as well start growing that one so you can attack with it.
Yeah, and Jeff still doesn't want to use his Spellskite. Really valuing setting something up later.
Well, he hasn't been able to. These are just sacrificing.
Oh, of course.
No,
Absolutely.
no modulars have happened just yet. He does have a Birds of Paradise to give him some blue mana, but he does need something that's not a land.
Well, he's got Eternal Witness, so that's definitely going to help. He can get the Revelark back from the graveyard, and that can start generating some value.
Yeah, so he can get back Revelark. He can play Revelark if he'd like. But he does only have that Birds of Paradise and Wall of Roots in his graveyard that he can get back with that Revelark trigger, unless he decides to throw PA and Kieran Nalaar under the bus on this next turn, which I imagine he's going to. But it's still looking pretty grim, and we are going to need to find a Court of Calling at some point if we're Jeff Hoogland here.
Yeah, Trey's board is pretty good, and he's just leaning on Jeff, and we got to see if Jeff can mount something.
So we're going to go ahead and go to Trey's turn here. He's drawn a card, and I didn't get a good look at it, but it looks like it's a non-land spell. It is a Vault Scourge. He's going to cast it for full cost. He's not going to use the Phyrexian mana. No real reason to at this point.
Yeah, he's not going to be doing anything else with his mana. So this is a little tricky figuring out on Trey's side how much he can attack with, because he wants to keep the pressure on. He doesn't want things to go into a board stall. And
Okay,
he's
so
actually attacking with his 1/1 flyer, even though it can get gobbled up by the Revelark.
yeah, he's doing that because he thinks that if anything, Jeff's going to try and put a bunch of creatures on an Arcbound Ravager to try and make it so that Trey has to sacrifice some creatures to it. What we have here is the Battle Cry. Oh, there is no Battle Cry, so it is just a 3/3.
Last turn.
Yeah, it is just a 3/3. It's going to bounce. We're going to see here Trey is going to sacrifice anything to try and save his 2/2 Arcbound Ravager, but his 7/7 Arcbound Ravager is going to kill PA and Kieran Nalaar and Eternal Witness. Now,
And it looks like Jeff is setting that up, expecting his Revelark to die
yeah,
and get those cards back.
yeah. So the Revelark dies along with the PA and Kieran and Eternal Witness. Revelark can bring back PA and Kieran and Eternal Witness, and then the Eternal Witness will bring back the Revelark, and we're back at square one.
Yeah, and I mean, Jeff only has one Revelark in this deck, but you can see, one is all you need when you can just keep recurring it.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, Jeff is, he's really making the most out of the few cards he has. If you look at this game, he's drawn a ton of mana and only a couple cards that have really done anything. But those cards have been so good, looping his Eternal Witness, Revelark, and P and Kieran Nalaar back so that he can just keep getting more and more value out of it. And despite Trey's good draw, he's having a hard time slogging through it despite Jeff kind of flooding out.
Absolutely. So it looks like Trey is going to sacrifice his Ravager to the other Ravager. It sounds like he's choosing to not do modular because Jeff does have that Spell Guide on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And this is going to keep the Revelark on the battlefield for one more turn, and that Vault Scourge is going to get in for a point of damage.
So while I do like that play in the short term, I'm curious as to what Trey's going to do about the Revelark next turn, because it's ooh.
So now we get a
Hello.
Kiki-Jiki that can copy the Revelark.
Who needs Court of Calling when you just got the Kiki-Jiki?
Yeah, so he's just going to be able to get in some damage here with the Revelark token, and when it dies, at the end of turn, we're going to get back Eternal Witness, PA and Kieran Nalaar. Jeff is just bought his ticket to Value Town. That Kiki-Jiki was just very good.
Yeah, this is really a great display of how powerful Jeff's deck is.
Yeah, I mean, he decides to get back a land with the Eternal Witness. No reason to get back one of the mana creatures in his graveyard, as they will come back when this Revelark dies.
And so a lot of these affinity decks will play Galvanic Blast, and there are 3 in Trey's deck, and he really needs to draw one soon.
I think he needs to draw 2.
Yeah.
Although that Spell Guide is just going to eat one.
That's very true.
Man, this board went from getting real sad for Jeff to very good. And there's a Path to Exile for the Arcbound Ravager.
So this is sweet because a lot of the games we've seen today have been a little bit on the one-sided. This game has had a lot of back and forth. It really seemed like Jeff was winning in the beginning. Trey started to, battle back in because Jeff was flooding out, but then Jeff finally drew a couple relevant spells, stabilized, and is now pulling ahead.
And this is one thing that we saw last weekend from Jeff when he was playing this Kiki Chord deck, is he is just very, very conservative.
Yeah.
He's only attacking with the token copies of this Revelark off of his Kiki-Jiki, not attacking with the regular Revelark, not trying to get in there with any of his Thopter tokens, He's just going to sit back, do for a turn, build up this giant board, and probably at some point start throwing Thopters with P and Kieran if he needs to.
Yeah, I really like that decision on Jeff's side. I mean, a lot of the times, if you just clearly identify your opponent as the aggressor and you are essentially the control deck, and that is the role that Jeff is playing here, it just makes sense to play conservatively, because as each side of the board builds, Jeff is just going to be farther and farther ahead.
So Jeff found a Scavenging Ooze, which there are a lot of creatures in Trey's graveyard from all of the Arcbound Ravager activations, but I think he's still just going to keep working this Revelark.
Yeah, there's not very many creatures in Jeff's graveyard because he keeps getting them back. But the one thing that I do really like about that Scavenging Ooze is Jeff is only at 8 life. And despite having the Spellskite and access to some blue mana, that is the one way that he could somehow lose the game, is just having his life total attacked in some strange way. And so getting that Scavenging Ooze really locks up the game, where Jeff has the bigger board, he just has way more resources, and now his life total is extra secure.
Yeah, so it looks like he's going to be throwing some Thopters here.
Well, I mean, time to end the game.
Looks like he did one and then decided not to. I think he kind of miscounted. Had he attacked with one more Thopter, then he would have lethal here with no blocks from Trey.
Well, truly an embarrassment of riches. I mean,
yeah, I guess.
he can do whatever he wants.
You can draw one more card.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens. Oh, there's the Galvanic Blast.
Wow.
So he's going to path the
good timing on that
Ravager in response to a Galvanic Blast on the Spellskite. And I think that as far as game one is concerned, it's just about everything's written on the wall for Trey.
Yeah, and he's scooping up his cards, and that's game. Man, Jeff really shown his muscle.
Yeah, he definitely did. I really like how that game kind of turned up. Like, Jeff was just kind of spinning his wheels, treading water for a bit on the power of Revelark, and then drew Kiki Jiki and busted it open.
I think Jeff should be the one who has no sleeves.
Probably.
I mean, that was a lot of brawn in that match.
Just flexing it.
Yeah, really.
So let's go ahead and take a look at their sideboards here so we can see what kind of action we got. Jeff does have an Engineered Explosives, 3 Lightning Helix, 2 Stony Silence, a Slaughter Games, a Burnt and Forge Tender, 1 more Spellskite, 2 Fulminator Mage, an Eidolon of Rhetoric, 1 Reclamation Sage, 1 Magus of the Moon, 1 Linvala Keeper of Silence. What do you think you go with here?
Well, if it was a Magus of the Moo, I would definitely bring it in. But other than that, I think the Engineered... basically all the removal can be really good. Engineered Explosives, Lightning Helix, the Spellskite can also be really good, but the real big home run here is the Stony Silence.
The slam dunk.
Yeah, that is a card that is just basically a silver bullet. If you play that early against Affinity, it can just shut down all of their synergies because their artifacts don't really work anymore. Reclamation Sage is also particularly notable because he can actually Chord of Calling for that one, which is really good. I think there may also be some corner case scenarios where he may want to bring in Fulminator Mages. I'm not exactly sure how much space he has in his main deck for cards to take out, but Fulminator Mage on the relevant Blink Moth and Ink Moth Nexuses can be really, really good.
Yeah, I have to imagine cards like Voice of Resurgence aren't going to be very good.
For sure.
The majority of the rest of the deck looks fine. As far as Trey goes with his Affinity sideboard, we've got 2 Ghost Quarter, 1 Thoughtcast, 1 Spellskite, 2 Hangerback Walker, 2 Ancient Grudge, 1 Whip Flare, 1 Dismember, 1 Relic of Progenitus, 2 Wear Tear, and 2 Thoughtseize. So what do you think Trey's going to do?
So from Trey's side, it should be pretty interesting. It doesn't seem like he's that well equipped to disrupt Jeff. I think he's going to mainly want to stick to his primary game plan of just being really, really aggressive. He could bring in a Thoughtcast for a little extra card advantage, or Hangerback Walker so that he can fight through a little more disruption. If he thinks that he can pull ahead by disrupting Jeff's game plan, he could consider bringing in the Whip Flare or the Dismember. The Relic may also be really good. We saw that Revelark and Eternal Witness do a lot of work. But having 1 Relic in your deck, it's probably unlikely that you draw your one of. It is an artifact, which is pretty valuable, but I'm not exactly sure really if he wants to interact. I think he may just want to beat down.
Yeah, I really like that Whip Flare. I think having the Whip Flare in the last game would have been very, very good for Trey.
Yeah, I agree. But we'll see, how he wants to take it. He may be more aggressive when he's on the play and be a little more interactive when he's on the draw. We'll have to see.
Absolutely. So as we can see here, most of these modern sideboards are pretty teched out. And if you want to get the latest tech, you can check out our StarCityGames.com newsletter.
Oh yeah, real good.
It's produced every week. It is your source for Magic the Gathering news. You can get the latest on the SCG Tour. You can watch the SCG Tour Match of the Week, receive exclusive deck lists and advice, catch up on all the event results. Also, you can read an exclusive cardboard crack comic, which the last one was actually real good.
Yeah. I read that to you in the hotel room.
Yeah.
That was great.
And you can sign up for free at go.starcitygames.com/newsletter.
Yeah, a really great way to get ahead, especially with new cards coming out. You kind of want to figure out what everyone's thinking so that you can get a jump on the metagame. And reading the articles is a great way to do that.
Absolutely. So we've got game 2 here. Trey McGinn on Affinity against Jeff Hoogland on Kiki Cord. Jeff is up a game, but Trey is starting with what looks like an explosive turn. We've got an Inkmoth Nexus, Welding Jar, Mox Opal into a Springleaf Drum.
All that for an 0-1.
Yeah, and a Signal Pest. So it does look like he has an Arcbound Ravager in his hand, which is going to be the big payoff for next turn. But this is really all going to hinge on if Jeff has a 1-mana mana creature to try and keep up here. And he always does.
Jeff does. Wow.
Now, I watched him like all last weekend, and he always had a Birds of Paradise. And I know that he plays with like 8th edition foil Birds of Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to say anything, but those foil Birds of Paradise like to be in play on turn 1 a lot.
Yeah, I think Jeff is a very powerful wizard. I think that's what it comes down to. Part of being a good Magic player is just knowing how to draw the cards off the top.
That's very true. That's very true.
So let's see, Trey's it still has a huge mana advantage. I mean, Jeff was on the play with a Birds of Paradise into Wall of Roots, which really helped Jeff keep pace. But this game, Trey has an even more explosive start than he did last game, and he's got he's on the play.
So this is 2
infect.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Can you just put him at 9 infect here if he wants to?
It'd be a bit of a risky play, but looks so. And I wonder what Jeff is thinking about. Oh, blocking, obviously.
So I think he's just going to take the 1 infect and put him to dead next turn if he does nothing.
Yeah, and this really showcases how if you get way ahead on mana, you can leverage that very quickly.
Yeah. All right, so there's the Spellskite that's going to protect him from being able to kill him with infect damage next turn. And this is the exact same start that Jeff had last game, and it worked out pretty well for him then.
Yeah, Jeff is on the draw, which is a bit of a difference, and Trey's draw is a little more explosive than it was last time. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what Trey can do, because last game it was fairly close for a while. We were thinking that Jeff was in bad shape, and right now Jeff can make it so that Inkmoth Nexus doesn't get pumped, but he doesn't really have much in the way of blocks. I mean, he just has 2 0-power creatures playing defense, so Trey can sort of just attack into them with impunity.
Yeah, in addition to that, he's getting Battle Cry from the Signal Pest, which is powering up the Inkmoth Nexus. He gets in a little chip damage here with that Arcbound Ravager, since Jeff doesn't want to risk losing it by blocking and having Trey sacrifice a bunch of his artifacts. But we do see here Jeff has a Ghost Quarter for his turn and enough mana to play Pia and Kira Nalara on turn 3, just like he did in game 1.
Yeah.
This is just, it's looking real good for him.
Yeah, I would just like to say once again that Jeff Hoogland is just a very powerful wizard. Knows how to draw cards off the top of his deck.
Quite the strong magician. Let's see what Trey can find here. It looks like a Galvanic Blast. That's a very good card.
It is a good card, but the fact that Pia...
The damage might already be done with
Yeah,
Pia
the fact
and
that Pia is 3 bodies is really, really rough. And Trey wants to keep swinging with that Inkmoth Nexus, because currently it looks like one of his better avenues to victory. But the fact that there's 2 of those 1/1 tokens mean that 1 Galvanic Blast is just not going to be enough.
Yeah, and Trey doesn't have enough mana to where he can Galvanic Blast, activate the Inkmoth Nexus, and pump it with a Blinkmoth Nexus if he needs to.
Yeah, pretty rough, but he still has a lot of options to him. There's a fair amount of play. There's the Welding Jar on the board, which can be used, and you know, we'll have to see how he wants to take it. He may be able to figure out a good way to get through this. And it looks like he is going to be attacking with it.
So I think he's using the Vault Scourge and the Springleaf Drum to activate the Nexus.
Well, actually, it looks like with the Opal, he'll be able to. Well, with the Nexus, do you have to pay a mana to pump?
You do.
Okay, yep.
Yeah,
so mana short.
So he's 1 mana short. But I imagine his plan here is to just use the Welding Jar to handle one of the Thopters.
Yeah, still a very, very rough trade.
Yeah, so it's looking like Jeff is thinking about only blocking a Thopter on an Inkmoth Nexus.
He may just want to sack something to the Ravager just to get it bigger.
Yeah.
I mean, if he can get it up to a 4-power creature, then that means he can...
So he's going to be able to pump, and he's just able to use his turn to get rid of one of those Thopters. That's actually pretty big for Trey.
For sure.
Not having to use the welding jar. He's still a couple turns away from being able to Galvanic Blast and get all in, but what's going to be real gross here is that Jeff does have Restoration Angel in his hand. And
ooh, brutal.
as nice of people as Pia and Kieran Nalaar are, they are not angels.
Yeah, Jeff is just so good at clogging up the board. And with the Birds of Paradise and Wall of Roots on the opening turns, he was able to clog up that board faster than Trey could take advantage of his own fast start.
Yeah, and because Wall of Roots lets you get mana on your turn and your opponent's turn, he's able to use it to cast Voice Resurgence here, and still be able to use it on Trey's turn to cast Restoration Angel, to blink his Pia and Kieran Nalaar, and just get a lot of value.
Yeah, Wall of Roots is one of the best mana accelerants. We were talking before with Spoilers how a 2-mana mana accelerant was so good,
Yeah.
and Wall of Roots is certainly among the best.
Now Trey does have Galvanic Blast and Dismember here, so he has some ways to interact.
Oh man, he's going to run into the Restoration Angel though. This is going to be brutal.
Yeah, this is not going to go well for Trey, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess this, from what we're seeing, it really seems like this is a bad matchup for Trey. But we've seen from Jeff just the Birds of Paradise into the Wall of Roots both times.
Well, he's gone Birds of Paradise into Wall of Roots Spellskite.
Yeah, both times. Yeah.
Which is quite good.
Yeah. With a Pia and Kieran Nalaar soon after.
Ooh, so are we going to get...
Yeah, the Angel.
This is not going to turn out well for Trey. Not only is Jeff going to be able to reset his Pia and Kieran and get some more tokens, he's going to force Trey's hand here on having to use some of his removal spell, but now he's going to have a 3/4 blocker that he can put in front of that Inkmoth Nexus.
Fortunately for Trey, though, it looks like he has the Dismember and the Galvanic Blast, so he might be able to take care of the Pia before it gets flashed in and out.
He's going to have to use both of them because of the Spellskite.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty rough for Trey, but it would be worse if he didn't have both those removal spells.
Yeah.
And he can pay life here, and it's really, you know, his life total just isn't that relevant. It's all about Jeff's life total.
That is true.
But now this Restoration Angel is certainly going to gobble something up.
Yeah, but he is free to make this Inkmoth Nexus very big, if he would like.
And a big Inkmoth Nexus can be something that he just rides to victory. I mean, Jeff wouldn't have that many ways to deal with it. He's got Path to Exile, Kasali Pride Mage.
Yeah.
But it looks like that's what he's going to do. I think that's probably his best bet. The Infect damage is really powerful. The big flyer is really powerful.
Yeah, so it looks like he's going to regenerate the Inkmoth Nexus. He's going to sacrifice the Vault Scourge and a Springleaf Drum to make his Ravager a 3/3. Jeff's Voice Resurgence is going to die and get an Elemental token, which will be a 4/4. But he does still have a lot of mana available to him, and if he just untaps here into Kiki-Jiki, he just wins, right? So it does not look like he has Kiki-Jiki in his hand, but he could have just won the game there. Like, how crazy is that? That you have all of this play, but because of Firelit Thicket, he could have just won the game.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly one of the good things about Jeff's deck. Also, just whatever creature is good in the matchup, he can recur.
Yeah. So we've got an Eternal Witness here is going to rebuy a Vault or a Spellskite. He's going to cast the Spellskite, and he's not going to attack with his Restoration Angel or the Elemental token, who is quite large at this point. He is just going to play it a little bit safe, like you said. He is the control deck in this matchup. At some point, he has to turn the corner, but for now, he's sitting pretty.
Yeah, I mean, if both sides just build up boards, Jeff basically comes out ahead. One other thing that I'd like to highlight about this, we saw the Spellskite die and then almost immediately get recurred. One nice thing about Jeff's deck is just how economical it is with its card slots. He gets to have more silver, or few slots devoted to silver bullets, but gets to use them more often than basically any other deck that I've seen. And because he's got Court of Calling that can get the silver bullet or get the Eternal Witness to recur it, it seems like in these matches, he just gets to keep using cards that are great in the matchup over and over again.
Now, Trey did pick up a Wear and Tear to handle that Spellskite, but it looks like Jeff did draw his Kiki-Jiki. He's going to cast it. He does have a Spellskite to protect him. He's going to be able to make 100 billion Restoration Angels and win the game.
And that is game, folks. Man, Jeff Hoogland. And you can really see how his brew is a real deck. You know, some people say, oh, it's just a brew, you know, people don't know how to play against it or whatever, but Jeff put on a masterclass with that deck. Really, really impressive stuff. All of his cards were really good. He was up against an extremely fast deck and was able to just clog up the board and then at his leisure, essentially, combo off.